Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we read Ecclesiastes chapter 7. This chapter reminds me a lot of the Proverbs, which is interesting because Solomon wrote the Proverbs also. So I'm just going to pull out a few that really stood out to me and kind of taught me good lessons, made me think of good wisdom that I have learned along my way. We'll start out in verse 1. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. A good name is better than fine perfume. That's where I'm going to camp out first. Tony Evans talked about, when someone smells really good, and maybe you have people in your lives that kind of wear a lot of perfume and stuff, and when they're coming, you smell them before they get there, and you think, you just think good things like, they smell good or whatever. Well, even more important than that is a good character. It's good character. When you see someone coming and their character goes before you, I love when Dusty comes up because he's so positive and he brings joy into my life. That's more important than smelling good, but you better smell good too.
Yeah. Hey, does it make you think of like old men and their aftershave? How like you can walk in.
I can think of specific
You remember Charlie?
Yes.
Okay, so like you would just walk into a room after he had been there. It'd been like an hour, and you'd be like, Charlie was here.
And if you hug him, you smelled like him too. So that's precious.
Yeah, that was great.
So good character is really important. Verse 2, and I kind of think verse 1 flows into this. It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. And this is a good reminder of what's important in life. Something that Dustin and I have talked about before. When life slows down for funerals, it's really important for us to do that because there aren't many things that slow us down and make us that contemplative, that assessing our life and thinking about what happens to all of us, the end of all of us. And so those times are really important for us to remember why we're here on earth and that our days are numbered and we have no idea the length of our own lives.
Yeah, I want to jump in and say funerals are where we think about eternity. Mm-hmm. Like the opposite of a funeral would be a party. A party is not where you think about the future. The party is where you're enjoying the now. And so there is a benefit to thinking long term, because if you never think long term, you never lay up treasure in heaven because you're never concerned about beyond right now.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's important. And we've also noticed a lot of times in funerals, people are trying to shorten them or, because they don't want to think about those things. And so it's an important practice that we have. Verse 3, grief is better than laughter, for when a face is sad, a heart may be glad. There's a thing that I've just said it recently because one of my friends was sick. And she said, I've been so sick, all I can do is thank God that we're pretty much well people. We're pretty much healthy people. And I'm like, there is nothing that makes you more thankful for being well than when you're sick. And so while grief is difficult and sadness is hard, it teaches us to be thankful for the times where life is good, life is going well, and there's joy.
That's true. All right, so I want to make another connection. So when we read Ecclesiastes, it sounds like we're also reading the Proverbs, which makes sense. But also there's another wiser figure in the Bible that when you read this, it also sounds very much like what he said. So if nobody was as wise as Solomon that came before Solomon.
Blessed are those who mourn.
There it is.
Because he's wiser than Solomon.
Jesus was God in flesh. And so in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus begins in Matthew chapter number 5. Jesus begins to give some statements that I bet the average person really struggled with, because the average person still struggles with these things. Now listen to him. Jesus said, blessed are the poor. Blessed means like happy, but it's a multiplied happy. It's like happy. Happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. And so you have all of these statements that are the exact opposite of the way the world works. And now, you look back on Solomon, and Solomon is saying that it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. The end of a man's life is more important than the beginning of his life. And when you're reading through this, all of this sounds like It sounds like the Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount. Why? Because Solomon has the gift that God gave him of access to the wisdom of God. Notice, for instance, where he says that a man's ending is the day of one's death is and the day of death is better than the day of his birth. I read a guy recently. He said this. He said the most important part of the race is not the start line, it's the finish line. And he says, yes, how you start is important, but you can have a bad start and still finish well. However, if you finish badly, then it doesn't matter how you started. You're simply tired and it was all for nothing, because finishing is everything. You got something to point out there?
Well, that was another that's actually 8 also. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. And I thought those same things. I'm amazing. I'm such a good starter. I love starting new things, but it's difficult to stick through and be patient and to be faithful to finish it. And I guess one of the big, most momentous times that I was a finisher is in reading the Bible through. I have started the Bible 8 million times in my life. I know the Old Testament, especially the Torah, the most difficult part, I would say, like the law to get through. I've read it 8 million times, and then I fell off the bandwagon for years. And so the first time that I completed read the Bible through in a year, and it took me like over 2 years. That's how it was to me. But can I just say, the finish and the accomplishment of finishing well is way better than starting something. Anyone can start something. Finishing is way more difficult.
That's right. So we're in the first part. It sounds like the Beatitudes. The later verses sound again like Proverbs, but they're Proverbs that kind of like he gets to meddling a little bit. So like look in verse 9. He says, do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. It's on the inside. He says, and when it comes out in outbursts, it means it's been stewing on the inside. So if you're angry instead of gentle, you're actually being the opposite of Christ-like. Because like Philippians chapter 4, what's the command to the scripture? It's rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. And so this kind of unrestrained anger, frustration, just this furious kind of response to life. By the way, whether you let it out or whether you're holding it in, it just indicates that something is not right. Those who are quick to jump to anger usually make bad decisions. So easy access to anger shows a bitterness that's really living down in the heart. When he gets down to verse 15, he says this. He says, do not be overly righteous, which this is the one why I think it needs some explanation. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise, nor should you destroy yourself. And so, like, when you read this, you go, okay, Solomon's telling me, just take it easy. Like, why put out the extra effort? Why be a little extra in your faith? And it sounds counterproductive to the conclusion that he eventually comes to. But I'm going to tell you, I think what he's saying here is like Warren Wiersbe says. He says, do not claim to be righteous or wise. Solomon warns here against self-righteousness and the pride that comes out of it. Let me give you a prime example. Those who come later than Solomon, they don't listen to this. And it shows, and Jesus comes across them a lot, the Pharisees. In public, they wore the long robes, they prayed the long prayers, they were known for their religious, but Jesus said that they were like dirty cups, washed on the outside, filthy on the inside. They were like whitewashed coffins, dead men on the inside, but look nice on the outside. And so he's not saying that you shouldn't take your faith seriously. He's saying that you should take it so seriously that you don't have to tell people how religious you are, how faithful you are, because it genuinely overflows from the outside, from the inside to the outside. And so don't claim something you're not, but be what you really are, but be holy. That's an interesting way, because Solomon has just said in all of these verses, he says, all of this I have proved by my wisdom. I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. And so in verses 23, 24, 27, and 28, all of his study could not produce the answers he needed for life. So his only answer then, he recognized it can't come from life itself. We have to look beyond what's under the sun and live a life by faith. This is Solomon's grand experiment, and what he's saying is that something more than what this world can offer is what's got to be pursued, or else we'll end up empty and hollow. And that's not what God has for us. That's what I have for the chapter. You got anything else?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter number 8. We'll see you then.
Bye.